us go back into the Old Testament from 1 Kings chapter 17. A story about a woman who had nothing left. Not much food, not much hope. Just her and her son living in a land full of starvation that hadn't seen rain for months. The skies were dry, the earth cracked, and every day felt like a countdown to their last. You see, there was a terrible drought across the land. Crops had failed, wells had dried up, people watched their fields wither, and their children go hungry. It was a hard, hopeless time, and yet God was still at work, quietly writing a miracle through one widow's life. And this widow was known as the widow of Zarephath. Far away from her small home, God spoke to his prophet, Elijah. Now Elijah had already stood before the king of Israel and boldly declared there would be no rain unless God said so. That was a brave thing to do, and it had made Elijah a hunted man. But God protected him. And when the brook he drank from finally dried up, God gave him a new instruction. Go to Zarephath, the Lord said. There, I've commanded a widow to supply you with food. Now, Elijah didn't ask questions. He didn't argue. He simply got up and started walking to that distant town, trusting that somehow God had already made a way. When Elijah finally arrived at the gates of Zarephath, he saw a woman gathering sticks. She looked tired, thin from hunger, weighed down by sorrow. This was the woman God had spoken of, a poor widow in the middle of a famine. Elijah called out gently, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may drink?" She turned to go, quietly and without complaint. But then he added something more. "And please, bring me a piece of bread." The woman stopped. Her shoulders sank a little. Slowly, she turned around. Her voice cracked with exhaustion as she said, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I'm gathering these sticks to take home and make one last meal for me and my son. After that will be the end of the journey for us." It wasn't anger in her voice. It was grief. Grief from watching her son grow weaker. Grief from not being able to do anything about it. Her heart was heavy, and this stranger had just asked for the very last of what she had left. But Elijah didn't flinch. He looked at her with calm, confident eyes and said something she didn't expect. "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid in a famine with nothing left to feed her child." But Elijah wasn't finished. "Go home," he said, "and do what you are planning. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." The woman stood still. Her heart must have pounded in her chest. It didn't make sense. How could the flour and oil last? But somehow, she believed him. Maybe it was the way he spoke. Maybe it was the gentle authority in his voice. Or maybe it was just a spark of hope lighting up her weary soul. So she went home and did exactly what Elijah had asked. She made him a small loaf of bread. Then she looked in a jar, and there was still flour. She poured from her jug, and the oil still flowed. She made another loaf for herself and her son. They sat down together and ate, not a final meal, but the first of many. And the next morning, the jar wasn't empty. The jug wasn't dry. The miracle continued. Day after day, meal after meal, they always had enough. It wasn't fancy, just bread and oil. But in a world of empty pantries and starving families, it was a daily miracle. God had not forgotten them. Elijah stayed with the widow and her son. The little house in Zarephath became a safe place, a quiet light during a dark time. The woman, once on the brink of despair, was now waking up each morning with renewed faith. But life isn't without sorrow, even in the middle of a miracle. One day, the widow's son became very ill. She watched helplessly as his breath grew shallow. And then, he was gone. Just like that. The same boy she'd feared losing weeks before. Now gone. Elijah took the lifeless child from her arms and carried him upstairs to the room where he stayed. He laid him gently on the bed, then fell to his knees in desperate prayer. "O Lord my God," Elijah cried, "let this boy's life return to him." He prayed not once but 3 times, pouring out his heart, begging for the boy's life. And then the boy breathed. God heard. Life returned. Elijah gathered the child in his arms and rushed back downstairs. When he placed the boy back into his mother's arms, her tears flowed again. But this time, they were tears of joy. She looked at Elijah and whispered, "Now I know, you are truly a man of God, and the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." So, what do we learn from the widow of Zarephath? That faith indeed can move mountains. That even in our most desperate moments, God sees us. That even when we think we have nothing, He is able to provide. And that trust, even the size of a mustard seed, can open the door to miracles we never imagine. Her story reminds us that God doesn't need plenty to do plenty. He just needs our faith. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories and lessons from the Bible. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.